Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
What I found particularly amazing about 2001 Space Odyssey is not the visuals, dialogue, storyline, based on the book written by no other Arthur C. Clarke, and space age themes, is the attention to detail and meticulousness. And because of that, we are immersed immediately by the film. For 2001, Stanley Kubrick wanted to build a space age world unlike any other. First, a living room that changed colors featured in the Hall of Science at the 1964 New York World's Fair, a starting point for his vision of his next film. After studying set designs from other 1960s era sci-fi films, Kubrick decided that he needed a more realistic design approach. His goal this time was to make the sets look authentic and, more importantly, to predict the technology of the future. As Kubrick and his team were creating the look of the 2001, NASA was racing to put a man on the moon. This is a video essay about the space age design and much more in 2001 Space Odyssey film. It's the 60s, and already Hollywood and many countries back then were fascinated with the notion of the future world. They explored it, expressed it in many different ways. Back then, comparative to present moment, it was taken in a more cheerful, exciting way. We see it retrospectively even in many drawings, articles, books, and cartoons of the 60s, even though its starting point was the futurist movement and manifesto written by Italian poet Filippo Tommaso Marinetti in 1909, promoting notions of speed, machinery, violence, youth, and industry. But these themes we find in here in 2001 is much more. To be short, Stanley Kubrick just finished Doctor Strangelove in 1964. Already was very keen to his new subject for his next movie, extraterrestrial life. He was already a fan of many movies, books of this genre, and he came across to this book, Arthur C. Clarke, Child Suits End, from 1953. But the early 60s, as Nathan Ambrose says in his book Kubrick and Odyssey, the golden age of sci-fi had run its course. During its heyday, there was a considerable variety of content within the overreaching genre. Of course, they were cultural, cinematic, in imaginations of the danger of communists or dangers of the advanced technology, which in the overheated political atmosphere of the time was seen as an imminent threat to the American way of life. The aliens in most sci-fi films are out simply to destroy or take over humanity. They are expressions of, to use the title of Susan Sontag's essay from Against Interpretation, the imagination of disaster. Fast forward to 1968. He co-writes the screenplay with Arthur C. Clarke, and the plot was inspired by his several short stories optioned from Clarke. To quote, most films are little more than stage plays with more atmosphere and action. And because of his background as a photographer, Kubrick prioritized images above words in his films. Of course, this was a challenge of that period to create a visual experience, one that directly penetrates the subconscious with an emotional and philosophical content, as he told in one of his interviews in 1968. But I personally think it was much more. The architectural elements enhancing the film and its vision are the interior design and the spacecraft architecture and advanced technology, including HAL 9000, which inspired many movies ahead if you think about it, including Star Wars, Interstellar, Ad Astra, Gravity, Blade Runner, and actually Wall-E from Disney Pixar. Despite the fact that the movie itself in 1969 release wasn't a big success at the box office, many times criticized by the film critics. All of this influenced the visuals, color palette, the entire structure or scale of the movie. But what's more fascinating is that it puts us into question some aspects of everyday life, still very actual for the present moment. Stanley Kubrick was an omniverse cinephile to mention. While conceiving 2001 Space Odyssey, he and his co-writer Arthur C. Clarke watched science fiction films from all around the world, cinema, westerns, documentaries, and avant-garde movies, looking for artistic, technical, and narrative inspiration. This influenced a lot the interior design approach. The furniture pieces iconic for the set design were Dijon chairs, ottomans and sofas by Olivier Morgue, pedestal tables by Ariel Sarnian, and Geoffrey Harcourt lounge chairs. Model 042 lounge chair for Artifort. Dijon chairs, or the low fireside chair, is named after the supernatural Dijini or genie of the Quran Islam religion, referring to an Islamic spirit capable of changing shape. It became famous after furnishing the futuristic rotating Hilton in the film, and Olivier Moore created undulating low long seating for both home and office environments, experimenting with color and material as well as flexibility and disposability. Zip of nylon jersey covers could be changed by season. The architectural now styles predominant are futurist, 60s modernist, minimalist, and space design. Later, we have the neoclassical style for the hybrid room from the final scenes of the film. It focuses not only on use of materials like glass, metal, plastics, but more on the concept of the future world, on the advanced technology, how it will look like, and vision of the director and of many brands that were required to send their visions, projects for the making of Space Odyssey. So, is just design? Interesting now to analyze is the spacecraft architecture and design made at the very last detail. The lighting and the structure of it enhances more the viewer to the point it's hypnotic and exciting. But the presence of this little guy made us question.
Good afternoon, Hal. How's everything going?
Good afternoon, Mr. Raymer. Everything is going extremely well.
Hal, you have an enormous responsibility on this mission. In many ways, perhaps the greatest responsibility of any single mission element. You're the brain and central nervous system of the ship, and your responsibilities include watching over the men in hibernation. Does this ever cause you any lack of confidence?
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
God-like presence is likewise presented in HAL. It conveys intelligence, logic, strength, and domination. The choice of lighting in these scenarios also contributes to the visual representation of HAL's 9000 God-like presence, and the decision to grant HAL with one eye strengthens the machine's inherent sense of omnipresence. Many people see the movie as Kubrick's critical warning to technology in general, and now to our days is already present in many apps like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. He described the future as consisting solely of people devoutly gazing at screens, oblivious to the outside world, and enabling computers to take the place of temples and shrines in our future and everyday life. He was right, though, and somehow predicted that this narrative will happen in real life. HAL 9000 serves as representation of this evolutionary leap, and we are giving an intriguing conundrum. The instruments that previously helped us advance are now holding us back because of its trust and our commodity to everyday tasks. In other words, technology is beyond man's control, necessitating the next stage of human evolution. And it's also something else to discuss. complex structure that always exists when a species is on the verge of evolution, appears in all three acts during the film. This enormous structure is the film's primary structural design element in many respects. Every time the monolith appears in a scene, it is put in an environment that doesn't look right. The object first appears in the center of the desert, then in the middle of a moon crater, then it orbits to Jupiter, and ultimately in the middle of a bedroom. This contrast of the monolith and the modernist design of the set is striking to many, including me. Going further to this scene. The final scene. This set inspired during the years many other movies, campaigns, and fashion shows. We see it often, but what actually presents or wants to show us in 2001 the true message of it. Besides the interesting combination of Rococo furniture pieces and futuristic atmosphere that is almost giving sanitary atmosphere. Well, it brings us to the viewers the full circle from the opening scene of the film. Dave Bowen, played by Keir Dullea, a scientist on the Discover One, is transported into another world or dimension after defeating Hal, the computer that controlled the systems of his spacecraft. At the end of his journey, Dave's spaceship miraculously appears in an empty room with white walls.
The idea was supposed to be that he is taken in by godlike entities, creatures of pure energy and intelligence with no shape or form. And they put him in what I suppose you could describe as a human zoo, and to study him. And his whole life passes from that point on in that room, and he has no sense of time. It just seems to happen as it does in the film. And they choose this room, which is a very inaccurate replica of French architecture, deliberately so inaccurate, because one was suggesting that they had some idea of something that he might think was pretty, but weren't quite sure, just as we aren't quite sure what to do in zoos with animals to try to give them what we think is their natural environment.
Feeling of distance in this room, from the outside world as well as from technology in general. The classical architecture of the room is complemented with Renaissance paintings, which are fixed into alcoves rather than simply being framed, suggestive of windows or mirrors. It consists of a king-size bed, several chairs and cabinets, and glowing floor tiles. All of these are chosen intentionally. The French-style furniture is both an imperfect reproduction of the original pieces and a possibly imperfect depiction of the Bowen's preferences from the viewpoint of a human being. He experiences a feeling of increasing dizziness at first that causes him to become disoriented and lose his sense of place. Even in Dr. Bowen's bedroom with all of the materials comfort, he is still feeling imprisoned, like a human zoo. The whole scene made many viewers to question topics about humanity, intelligence, human consciousness, science, what is kept from our eyes about. To come to a final conclusion, I want to quote from Henry Lefebvre's book Production of Space. Reductionists thus infiltrate science under the flag of science itself. Reduced models are constructed, models of society, of the city, of institutions, family, and so forth, and things are left at that. This is how social space comes to be reduced to mental space by means of a scientific procedure whose scientific status is really nothing but a veil for ideology. Reductionists are insisting in their praise for basic scientific method, but they transform this method first into a mere posture, and then in the name of the science of science, into a supposed absolute knowledge. Eventually, critical thought, which is not prescribed by the orthodox, wakes up to the fact that systematic reduction and reductionism are part and parcel of a political practice. The state and political power seek to become, and indeed succeed in becoming, the reducers of contradictions. In this sense, reduction and reductionism appear as tools in the service of the state and of power, not as ideologies, but as established knowledge, and not in the service of any specific state or government, but rather in the service of the state and power in general. Indeed, how could the state and political power reduce contradictions, incipient and renewed intrasocial conflicts, other than via the mediation of knowledge? And this by means of a strategy based on an admixture of science and ideology. And plus, I also want to add another quote from the same book. Indeed, the West is thus responsible for what Hegel calls the power of a negative, for violence, terror, and permanent aggression directed against life. It has generalized and globalized violence and forged the global level itself through that violence. Space as locus of production, itself product and production. It's both a weapon and a sign of this struggle. If it is to be carried through to the end, there is in any case no way of turning back this time. This gigantic task now calls for the immediate production or creation of something other than nature, a second different or new nature, so to speak. This means the production of space, urban space, both as a product and as a work, in the sense of which are created works. If this project fails, the failure will be total, and the consequences of that are impossible to foresee.